He saved the Apache chief's daughter, and the chief offered him something unthinkable. The sun was already high when Daniel Miller guided his old pickup along the dusty road that ran close to the Apache land. He had driven this route many times before, always careful, always respectful. He never crossed signs, never took shortcuts, never treated the land as if it belonged to him. People in nearby towns knew this road was close to sacred ground, and most avoided it. But Daniel used it only when his work forced him to. He was a quiet man in his early 30s, broad-shouldered from years of physical labor, with a calm face that showed more thought than words. He worked repairing fences, helping ranchers, and sometimes delivering supplies to remote areas. He kept to himself, not because he disliked people, but because life had taught him to be careful. That afternoon felt different from the start. The air was too still. Even the birds seemed quieter. Daniel slowed the truck, feeling an uneasy pull in his chest he couldn't explain. He told himself it was nothing, just heat and fatigue, but his hands tightened on the steering wheel. A few miles ahead, he noticed something odd near the roadside. Fresh marks in the dirt, footprints, not animal tracks, human. They were uneven, deep in some places, light in others, like someone had been stumbling. Daniel stopped the truck. He sat there for a moment, engine running, debating with himself. This was not his business. People disappeared out here sometimes, and asking questions could lead to trouble. Still, something about the tracks bothered him. He shut off the engine. As he stepped out, the silence pressed harder. The ground was dry, but near the prints he saw darker soil, as if something heavy had scraped across it. He followed the trail a short distance from the road, careful not to step directly on the prints. The path led toward a rocky slope scattered with shrubs and tall grass. Then he heard it. At first it was so faint he thought it was the wind, a soft sound, broken and uneven. He froze. The sound came again, clearer this time, a human voice, weak, in pain. Daniel swallowed. His heart began to pound. Every warning he had ever heard rushed into his mind. Do not enter Apache land uninvited. Do not interfere. Do not assume you are welcome. But another thought pushed through all of it. Someone was hurt, possibly badly. He moved forward. The terrain grew rougher and the heat pressed down on him. He followed the sound until he reached a shallow ravine. There, partially hidden by rocks and brush, lay a young woman. She was unconscious, her dark hair spread across the dirt, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Her breathing was shallow. Blood stained the side of her clothing where sharp stone had cut her skin. Daniel's breath caught. He knew immediately she was Apache, not because of clothing alone, but because of the beaded bracelet still wrapped tightly around her wrist, even torn and dusty. Panic surged through him, followed by fear. If he was found here, hovering over her, explanations might not matter. But she stirred, letting out a small, broken sound. That settled it. Daniel knelt beside her, careful, slow. He spoke softly, not knowing if she could hear him. "Hey, you're okay. I'm here. Don't move." He checked her injuries the best he could. Her leg was likely broken. She had scrapes and cuts, and she was badly dehydrated. Leaving her here would mean death. He looked around, scanning the land. No sign of anyone else. No horses. No vehicles. Whoever she was, she had been alone. Daniel removed his jacket and gently placed it under her head. He poured water slowly against her lips. After a moment, she swallowed. Her eyes fluttered open just enough to see him. Fear flashed across her face. "It's okay," he said quickly. "I'm not here to hurt you." Her eyes searched his face, weak but alert. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. Daniel felt a tight ache in his chest. He could walk away now and still claim he hadn't done harm, but the idea sickened him. "I'm going to help you," he said. "I promise." Carefully, he fashioned a temporary support for her injured leg using branches and strips torn from his shirt. It wasn't perfect, but it would help. Then came the hardest part, moving her. She was light, but the terrain made it dangerous. He lifted her slowly, steadying his breathing, and began the long walk back toward the road. Each step felt heavy with consequence. By the time he reached the truck, sweat soaked his clothes and his arms trembled. He placed her gently in the back seat, patting her with blankets. As he turned to grab more water, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. Footsteps, not one pair, several. Daniel turned slowly. Men emerged from the rocks and brush like shadows, Apache warriors. Their expressions were unreadable, their presence commanding. Daniel raised his hands at once, backing away from the truck. "I didn't hurt her," he said, his voice steady despite the fear racing through him. "I found her injured. I was trying to help." The warriors said nothing at first. One of them stepped forward and looked into the truck. His expression shifted instantly from suspicion to alarm. He spoke rapidly in his own language. More movement followed. Within minutes, the area was alive with quiet urgency. Someone checked the young woman's injuries. Someone else studied Daniel closely. Then she stirred again. She turned her head weakly and saw the men. Relief crossed her face. She said something softly, pointing toward Daniel. The warriors listened. One of them nodded slowly. The tension eased just a little. Daniel lowered his hands but remained still. He knew better than to assume anything. The man who seemed to be leading them approached him. "You brought her back," the man said simply. "Yes," Daniel replied. "I didn't know who she was, I just knew she needed help." The warrior studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "You will come with us." It wasn't a request. As they helped the young woman into another vehicle, Daniel climbed in as instructed. The truck drove away from the road, deeper into land he had never entered before. Daniel stared out the window, heart pounding. He had no idea what waited ahead, only that his life had already shifted in a way he could never undo. He had saved someone's daughter, and soon he would learn exactly who she was. The drive felt longer than it probably was. Daniel sat in the back seat of a dark SUV, his hands resting on his knees, his mind racing faster than the wheels beneath them. No one spoke to him. The Apache men in the vehicle kept their eyes forward, calm and alert, as if silence itself was part of their discipline. Daniel tried to steady his breathing. He reminded himself of one simple truth: he had done nothing wrong. Still, fear has a way of ignoring logic. The young woman lay carefully supported beside him, her breathing stronger now. Someone had wrapped her leg properly and cleaned the blood from her skin. Every few minutes, one of the men checked on her, speaking softly in their language. Daniel watched from a distance, careful not to intrude. He noticed how gentle they were, how focused. These were not men looking for trouble. These were men protecting their own. As the vehicle moved deeper into the land, the scenery changed. Flat desert gave way to rolling ground, then to a wide open valley. Daniel had lived near this area for years, but he had never seen this place before. It felt old, strong, alive in a way towns never were. They finally stopped near a cluster of buildings made from wood and stone, arranged in a wide circle. People were already waiting. Some stood quietly. Others moved quickly toward the vehicle when they saw the injured woman. As the door opened, a wave of emotion swept through the crowd. Concern, fear, relief. Daniel stepped out slowly, keeping his movements respectful. He stayed back as they carried her away. A woman touched the young woman's face and whispered something with shaking hands. An older man followed closely, his face hard with worry. Daniel knew, without being told, that this man was important. He stood taller than most, his hair streaked with gray, his posture straight and steady. His eyes never left the young woman as she was taken inside one of the buildings. When she disappeared from view, the man finally turned. His gaze landed on Daniel. The air shifted. Conversation stopped. Every eye moved toward him. Daniel felt the weight of it press against his chest. He didn't look away. He lowered his head slightly, a sign of respect, and waited. The man walked toward him slowly. There was no anger in his face, but there was power. The kind that didn't need to be announced. You are the one who found her, the man said. Yes, Daniel answered. She was hurt, alone. The man studied him closely as if reading more than just words. You could have left. Yes, Daniel said honestly, I could have. But you didn't, Daniel shook his head. No, I couldn't. Silence followed. The man nodded once, then turned to the others and spoke quietly. Two men motioned for Daniel to follow them. His stomach tightened again, but he obeyed. They led him to a shaded area near the edge of the circle. A chair was placed for him, but no one told him to sit. He stood, unsure of what was expected. Minutes passed, then more. Time stretched. Daniel replayed everything in his mind, the tracks, the voice. The moment he decided to help, he wondered if he should have done anything differently. Fear crept in again, whispering that good intentions did not always protect a man. Finally, the older man returned. His expression was calmer now, but still guarded. My daughter will live, he said. Daniel released a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. I'm glad, he said softly. The man watched him closely. You carried her, treated her wounds. I did what I could, Daniel replied. I'm not a doctor. You did enough. The words landed heavier than praise. They felt like acknowledgement. The man gestured for Daniel to sit. He did. You knew whose land this was, the man said. Yes. You knew there could be consequences. Yes. Why did you help her? Daniel didn't answer right away. He thought carefully, because she was hurt, because if I walked away I wouldn't be able to live with myself. The man nodded slowly. Many men speak of honor. Few act on it when fear stands in the way. Another silence followed. This one felt different, less threatening. More thoughtful. You will stay here tonight, the man said. Not as a prisoner, as a guest. Daniel looked up, surprised. Thank you. Food was brought. Simple but warm. Someone offered him water. Daniel ate slowly, aware that eyes still watched him, but with less suspicion now. Children passed by, curious. Some stared openly, others whispered. As evening approached, the land changed again. The heat softened. Shadows grew long. Daniel was given a place to rest near a fire. He sat quietly, listening to the low sound of voices and the crackle of wood. Later, the older man returned once more. She asked for you, he said. Daniel stood at once. Is she okay? She is resting, the man said. But she wanted me to see the man who did not leave her to the sun. They walked together to the building where she lay. Daniel stopped at the entrance, unsure if he should go in. The man nodded once, permission. Inside, the light was soft. The young woman lay awake now, her eyes clearer. When she saw Daniel, her lips curved into a faint smile. You stayed, she said quietly. Yes, Daniel replied. I wanted to make sure you were safe, she nodded. You saved my life. Daniel shook his head. I just helped you get home. Her father watched the exchange closely. Something shifted in his expression. Pride, gratitude, thought. When Daniel stepped back outside, night had fully arrived. Stars filled the sky, brighter than he had ever seen them. He sat by the fire, exhausted but unable to sleep. He knew this was not the end of the matter. Saving the chief's daughter was not just an act of kindness. It was a thread now tied to his fate, and soon that thread would pull him toward a decision he never imagined facing. Some choices, once made, do not end when the danger passes. They begin. Morning came quietly. Daniel woke to the sound of wind moving through tall grass and the distant call of birds. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then he saw the shapes of the buildings, the slow movement of people beginning their day, and the small fire nearby that had burned down to warm ash. Reality settled in again. He stood slowly, stretching his sore muscles. A young boy approached and offered him a cup of warm drink. Daniel accepted it with a nod and a quiet thank you. The boy smiled and ran off. That small act eased something inside him. Fear still lived in his chest, but it was no longer sharp. As the sun climbed higher, Daniel noticed activity increasing. Men and women moved with purpose. Whispers passed from one group to another. He sensed that something important was coming. He was not ignored, but he was not addressed either. He was simply watched. Later, two men approached him and asked him to follow. Their tone was calm but firm. Daniel did not ask questions. He walked with them toward a larger building at the center of the circle. It stood slightly apart, stronger in build, with carved markings along its entrance. Inside, the air was cooler. Elders sat in a wide half-circle. Some were old, their faces lined with years of wisdom. Others were younger but carried authority in their posture. At the center stood the Apache chief. Daniel stopped where he was told. He kept his hands visible, his posture respectful. "This is not a trial," the chief said, "but it is a time for truth." Daniel nodded. "I understand." The chief gestured for him to speak. "Tell us what happened, from the beginning." Daniel took a breath and began. He spoke simply, without trying to sound brave or important. He described the road, the footprints, the sound that made him stop. He told them how he found the young woman, how hurt she was, and how he knew leaving her would mean death. He admitted his fear. He admitted his doubt. "I knew I might be crossing a line," he said, "but I also knew I couldn't walk away." The elders listened without interruption. When Daniel finished, silence filled the space. One elder leaned forward. "You knew she was Apache," the elder said. "Yes." "You knew helping her could bring trouble." "Yes." "Did you expect a reward?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I expected to be told to leave, or worse." A low murmur passed through the elders. The chief raised his hand and the room quieted again. "Why did you stay with her until help arrived?" the chief asked. Daniel answered honestly, "Because she was afraid, and because no one should be left alone like that." The chief studied him for a long time, then he nodded once. "You speak plainly," he said. "Plain words are hard to fake." One by one, the elders asked questions. Not sharp questions meant to trap him, but careful ones meant to understand him. They asked about his life, his work, his family. Daniel answered without hiding his past. He spoke of loss, of moving often, of learning to survive by doing honest work. "I don't belong to much," he said quietly, "but I try to do right where I stand." When the questioning ended, Daniel was asked to wait outside. The hours that followed felt heavier than any moment before. He sat under a tree, watching shadows shift across the ground. He wondered what decision was being made inside, whether he would be asked to leave, whether he would be told never to return, or whether something worse waited. Time stretched. At last the chief emerged. "Come," he said. Daniel followed him to a quieter place away from others. The chief did not sit. He stood, hands clasped behind his back, eyes on the horizon. "My daughter is strong," the chief said, "but even the strong can fall." Daniel nodded. "You did not help her because she was my daughter," the chief continued. "You helped her because she was human." "Yes," Daniel said, "that matters." The chief turned to face him. "In our ways, actions speak louder than blood. You stepped into danger without being asked. You respected our land even when fear was close." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "You will remain here a little longer," the chief said, "not because we do not trust you, because we wish to understand you." Daniel bowed his head slightly. "I will respect that." The day passed slowly. Daniel helped where he could, carrying water, repairing a loose fence, doing small tasks offered to him. No one ordered him. They simply watched how he behaved when no one was watching. As evening approached, the chief's daughter appeared, supported by a cane. Her leg was wrapped, but her steps were steady. When she saw Daniel, she smiled openly this time. "My father is listening to his heart," she said quietly as they passed each other. Daniel did not know how to respond. That night a small gathering took place near the fire. No speeches, no announcements, just food shared quietly. The chief sat across from Daniel, observing him without speaking. Later, when the fire burned low and stars filled the sky again, the chief finally spoke. "Some acts create a debt," he said, "not one that can be paid with objects." Daniel listened carefully. "Tomorrow," the chief continued, "I will speak an offer." Daniel's chest tightened. "An offer?" "Yes," the chief said. one that will test more than your courage." He stood and walked away, leaving Daniel staring into the fire, heart pounding. Daniel had faced danger before. He had faced hunger, loss, and loneliness. But this was different. Whatever the chief planned to offer would change the shape of his life. And Daniel did not yet know if he was ready to accept the weight of it. The next morning arrived slower than the others. Daniel felt it the moment he opened his eyes. The air was heavy, not with heat but with meaning. People moved differently, spoke more quietly. Even the children seemed calmer, as if they sensed that something important was about to happen. Daniel washed his face at the water basin and took a deep breath. He reminded himself to stay grounded. Whatever was coming, he could only face it honestly. Shortly after sunrise, a young man came to him and asked him to follow. This time, the walk felt longer. They passed through the center of the settlement and moved toward an open area where a wide circle had been cleared. Elders were already there, seated in a half circle. Others stood behind them. No one spoke loudly. There was no tension, but there was focus. The Apache chief stood at the center. Daniel stopped where he was directed. He stood straight, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes respectful but steady. The chief looked around at his people before speaking. His voice was calm, strong, and carried easily. "This man came onto our land without invitation," he said. "He knew the risk, he knew the history, yet when my daughter lay hurt and alone, he did not turn away." Murmurs passed softly through the crowd. "He did not know who she was," the chief continued. "He did not know her name. He helped because it was right, not because it was safe." The chief turned his eyes to Daniel. "In our ways," he said, "such actions are not small." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He said nothing. The chief raised his hand slightly and the elders leaned in. "We have watched him," he said. "Not only in the moment of danger but after. We watched how he spoke, how he worked, how he treated our people when no one asked him to." The chief paused. "And what we saw was consistency." Daniel swallowed. The chief stepped closer. "You did not ask for reward," he said, "but life sometimes places gifts before us anyway." A hush fell over the circle. "My offer to you," the chief said, "is not payment, it is responsibility." Daniel's heart began to pound. The chief spoke slowly now, choosing each word carefully. "I offer you protection under my name, a bond of trust, a place where you will no longer be seen as a stranger who walks alone." Gasps were quiet but real. Daniel's mind struggled to keep up. Protection, trust, a bond, these were not things given lightly. "You would be welcome here," the chief continued, "not as one of us by blood, but as one of us by word and action." Daniel felt the weight of the offer settle on his shoulders. "This means," the chief said, "that your choices will no longer affect only you. You will be expected to honor our ways, to stand when standing is hard, to speak truth, even when silence would be easier." The chief's eyes did not leave Daniel's face. "And it also means," he said, "that when you walk this land, you will not walk it alone." Silence stretched. Daniel's throat felt dry. He understood now why the chief had said the offer would test more than courage. Accepting meant giving up the freedom to drift. It meant belonging, and belonging came with duty. The chief stepped back. "You do not have to answer now," he said, "but you will answer today." Daniel was guided away from the circle and given time to think. He walked slowly to the edge of the land where the grass met open ground. He stared out at the distance, his thoughts tangled. All his life, he had stood on the outside of things. He had learned to rely only on himself. He had learned that attachment often led to loss. This offer threatened that careful balance. It offered safety, but also roots. He thought of the moment in the ravine, how easy it would have been to walk away, how heavy the silence would have been if he had. He realized then that the choice had already begun there. As the sun climbed higher, Daniel returned. The people gathered again. The chief stood waiting. Daniel stepped forward. "I don't know all your ways," Daniel said. "I won't pretend that I do." The chief nodded slightly. "But I know what it means to keep a promise," Daniel continued. and I know what it means to stand by a choice once it's made." He took a breath. "If you offer me trust," he said, "I won't treat it lightly. I will respect your land, your people, your rules. Not because I'm asked to, but because I'm choosing to." The chief studied him for a long moment. "You understand," the chief said quietly. "Good." He turned to the elders, then back to Daniel. "Then the bond is made." The words carried through the air like a stone dropped into still water. No cheers followed, no celebration, just nods, quiet acceptance. That, Daniel realized, made it more real than anything loud ever could. The chief stepped forward and placed his hand over his heart, then extended it. Daniel mirrored the gesture. "You will walk carefully," the chief said, "and you will walk protected." Daniel bowed his head. "I will." Later that day, as the sun began to lower, Daniel sat near the fire again. The chief's daughter approached, moving with more strength now. She stopped in front of him. "My father does not make empty offers," she said. "I know," Daniel replied. She smiled. "Then welcome." Daniel watched the fire crackle, feeling the truth settle in. The chief had offered him something unthinkable, not wealth, not power, but belonging. And by accepting it, Daniel had crossed a line he could never step back over. The shape of his life had changed. And the final meaning of that change was still waiting to unfold. The days that followed did not rush forward. They settled into Daniel's life slowly, like dust after a long journey. Nothing dramatic happened right away, and that was what surprised him most. He had expected a sudden change, some clear sign that everything was different. Instead, life continued, but he was no longer standing outside of it. Daniel was given a small place to stay near the edge of the settlement. It was simple and clean. No one hovered over him, no one tested him openly. Yet he could feel the quiet attention of the people around him. They watched not to judge, but to understand. Daniel understood this kind of watching. It was how trust was built. Each morning he woke early. He helped where help was needed. Some days it was repairing a fence damaged by wind. Other days it was carrying supplies, clearing paths, or fixing tools. He did not wait to be asked. He remembered the chief's words about responsibility and let them guide his actions. The Apache chief did not summon him again right away. When they passed each other, the chief nodded once, nothing more. That nod carried more meaning than any speech. It told Daniel he was being seen. The chief's daughter healed steadily. Her steps grew stronger each day. Sometimes she sat nearby while Daniel worked, offering quiet conversation. She told him about the land, about how her people listened to it, not just lived on it. Daniel listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He had learned that listening was its own kind of respect. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft colors, the chief joined Daniel by the fire. "You are settling," the chief said. "I'm trying to," Daniel replied. The chief studied him. "Trying is good, pretending is not." Daniel smiled faintly. "I don't know how to pretend anymore." The chief nodded. "Then you will do well." Seasons shifted. Daniel did not notice the change all at once. It came in small signs, the air cooling, the light changing, the rhythm of days adjusting. With each change, Daniel felt himself growing steadier. The restlessness he had carried for years began to quiet. One afternoon, a problem arose near the outer land. A disagreement over boundaries, small but tense. Daniel found himself present not by choice, but by circumstance. He stood quietly while voices rose, then fell. When asked for his view, he spoke carefully, choosing words that did not push, only clarified. The chief watched closely. Later, when the matter was settled peacefully, the chief spoke to him privately. "You did not take sides," he said. "I took responsibility," Daniel answered. The chief nodded. "That is the difference." It was then Daniel understood the true meaning of the bond he had accepted. It was not about privilege. It was about balance. About carrying weight without being seen as heavy. Months passed. Daniel no longer felt like a visitor. He was still not Apache by blood, and he never claimed to be. But he was no longer alone. People greeted him by name. Children laughed when he passed. Elders spoke to him directly. Trust, once given, had grown quietly. One night under a sky full of stars, the chief spoke again. "Do you regret staying?" he asked. Daniel thought carefully. "No," he said. "I regret the years I spent thinking I had to walk alone." The chief looked at the stars. Many do. The chief's daughter joined them. She moved freely now, no sign of injury left. She looked at Daniel with calm gratitude, no debt in her eyes, only respect. "You chose when it mattered," she said. "That choice keeps choosing you back." Daniel felt the truth of her words settle deep. In time, Daniel returned occasionally to the nearby town. People noticed the change in him. He spoke less but with more certainty. He walked differently, not guarded, not drifting, rooted. When asked why he no longer stayed away for long, he answered simply, "I have a place." Years later, the story spread, not as a legend but as a reminder, of a man who helped without asking who was watching, of a chief who saw character instead of fear, of a bond formed not by agreement on paper but by action. Daniel never called himself a hero. He never told the story unless asked, and when he did, he always said the same thing. "I didn't save her," he would say. "I just didn't walk away." But those who knew the truth understood something deeper. One choice, made in silence, had built a bridge between worlds. And on that bridge, a man who once belonged nowhere finally found where he stood, not because he was offered something unthinkable, but because he was brave enough to accept it.